In the morning of May 29th in 2017, a police officer in Jupiter, Florida pulls over a black Mercedes S-Class that's swerving across both lanes of traffic. The car stopped in the middle of the road, engine running, and the driver is asleep at the wheel. The officer taps on the window, the driver awakes, he's disoriented, he doesn't know where he is. He tells the officer he's coming from LA, but he's in Florida, and the driver's name is Tiger Woods. And the funny thing about what happened that night is he wasn't under the influence of alcohol. Tiger blew 0.00 into the breathalyzer. What was in his system was a cocktail of 5 legally prescribed medications: Vicodin, Dilucidid, Xanax, Ambien, and THC. Every single one of those drugs had a doctor's signature on it, because these are drugs that you cannot get in America over the counter. If this story from 2017 sounds familiar, that's because the same thing happened less than a week ago to none other than Tiger Woods himself again. Today we're talking about something that is very visible and happening right now in wellness culture in America, which is America's obsession with self-medication. From Tiger Woods passing out in a car twice on a prescription cocktail, to people injecting peptides they bought from research chemical websites into their stomachs, in their bathrooms. So how did we get here? And more importantly, is the system that was supposed to protect us actually part of the problem? In medical and nursing school, one of the things they first teach you is that the most dangerous patient is usually not the sickest one. It's the one who thinks they know better than the chart. Because that patient will override every instruction you give them. They'll take twice the dose because it wasn't working fast enough. They'll stop the antibiotics after 3 days because they feel better. And then they'll end up back in the ER, sicker than before, and genuinely confused about why. And this type of patient exists at every income level. But when you have money, and I mean real money, where you can find a doctor who agrees with you, or you can keep looking until you find one that says yes, then you can pay for the prescription that everyone else said was too risky. And you can have a physician always on speed dial whom you can call whenever you need that medication at 1 a.m. We've seen this happen in America so many times. In the early 1970s, Elvis Presley was in chronic pain. Years of performing, injuries, and the grinding pressure of being the most famous entertainer on earth had caught up with him. His personal physician was a man named Dr. George Nichopoulos. Dr. Nick, as Elvis called him. Between January 1977 and August 1977, the last 8 months of Elvis's life, Dr. Nick prescribed him over 10,000 doses of sedatives, amphetamines, and narcotics. That's more than 1,200 pills and injections per month. Now, Dr. Nick wasn't a bad man. He was a man who was put in an impossible position. A physician whose patient was also his employer, his meal ticket, and one of the most powerful men in American entertainment. Every time he tried to slow down the prescriptions, Elvis found another doctor. And that's the clinical trap for a lot of physicians who deal with clients who have unlimited wealth. The patient has more power than the system designed to protect him. Elvis died in 1977, and the official cause of death was a cardiac arrhythmia. But the autopsy also found 14 different drugs in his system. Not all of them had caused the arrhythmia, but together they destroyed his body over the years. Fast forward 30 years and the pattern repeats, with a new drug and a new king. By 2009, Michael Jackson couldn't sleep. This wasn't a small problem. Chronic insomnia is genuinely dilapidating, as it erodes cognition, immune function, emotional regulation, and Michael tried everything. And what he landed on was propofol. And for those who don't know, propofol is an anesthetic. It's the drug we use to put people under for surgery. It's administered intravenously and it requires monitoring equipment. So it is not under any clinical definition a sleep aid at all. But Michael had a doctor, Dr. Conrad Murray, who agreed to administer it to him nightly in a hotel room with improvised monitoring equipment. And so in June 2009, Michael Jackson stopped breathing. Conrad Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. But the question still remains, would Michael Jackson have been able to get propofol in his bedroom if he were not Michael Jackson? And the answer is no. Never, not in a million years. And that's the point, because the healthcare system in America does have guardrails. Wealth is a guardrail remover, and when you remove enough guardrails on powerful enough compounds, people die. Now that brings us to 2026, because what used to require Michael and Elvis money and a compliant physician now costs $80 and a Reddit account. But the internet didn't create America's DIY drug culture, it simply democratized it. And to understand why that happened, we need to go back to 1994. In 1994, Congress passed the Dietary Supplement and Education Act, DSHEA for short. On the surface, it was a consumer freedom bill. It said the FDA could not regulate vitamins, minerals, herbs, and supplements the same way it regulated drugs. And so manufacturers didn't need to prove their products were safe before selling them. The FDA had to prove something was unsafe in order to pull it from the shelves. And the supplement industry lobbied hard for this bill, and they won. And so what the DSHEA effectively created was a legal loophole, a massive regulatory gap between FDA-approved pharmaceuticals and the unregulated supplement industry. And that gap has only grown wider in the 30 years since. And today, that gap is where the entire peptide industry lives. So let me tell you what's happening right now with wellness culture, because I want you to understand the scale of this. There are hundreds of thousands of people, predominantly men, but increasingly everyone, who are self-injecting compounds called peptides that they purchase from websites labeled for research purposes only. The most common ones you hear about are BPC-157, also known as the body protection compound. This compound was originally studied for gut healing and wound repair in rat models, and it has genuine interesting science behind it, but zero completed human randomized controlled trials as of 2026. And people are injecting it subcutaneously, meaning under the skin, based on posts from influencer anecdotes on Reddit or TikTok. We have no idea the sterility standards of these peptides. We have no idea if they have any long-term oncological risk, which means they may cause cancer. We have no idea the interaction profiles that they have, and yet everyone's injecting it in their bathroom. Another popular peptide is something known as TV500, which is a synthetic version of a naturally occurring peptide known as thymosin beta 4. It's also been studied for tissue repair, also not approved for human use, and it's sold openly online, and is also being injected by people who have watched a YouTube video. And then you have another popular one known as Ipamorelin and CJC1295, which is known as a growth hormone. And the goal of this is to stimulate your pituitary glands to release growth hormones. And so people are using them for anti-aging, fat loss, muscle gain, but nobody is monitoring things like their IGF-1 levels, which when chronically elevated, this can be associated to an increased risk for cancer. And then there's the one that has captured the entire cultural moment, the mother of them all, compounded semaglutide and tirzepatide. By 2023, semaglutide, which consists of drugs like Ozempic, Wegovy, had become the most talked about drugs on the planet. The waiting list to get these drugs were months long, and the cost without insurance was over $1,000 a month. For most people, it was simply inaccessible. So what did Americans do? They found a workaround. Compounding pharmacies, which are facilities that can legally create custom formulations of drugs, began producing their own versions of semaglutide and tirzepatide at a fraction of the cost. Some were legitimate operations with proper oversight, many were not. People were ordering compound GLP-1s online from telehealth platforms with 15-minute consultations and no metabolic baseline, no follow-up, no one-on-one monitoring for pancreatitis or gastroparesis or muscle loss. By 2024, the FDA had issued multiple warnings, and ER physicians were reporting a new wave of patients that were coming in with severe nausea, vomiting, gastroparesis, and aspiration under anesthesia because nobody knew that being on a GLP-1 slowed down gastric emptying. In early 2025, the FDA cracked down on compounders, pulling most of these formulations from the market. And the response was fascinating because there was a lot of outrage. People felt like their access was being taken away. Now, here's where I need to stop and do something very important because it will be very easy and very wrong to make this video about individual recklessness. Because it will be very easy and very wrong to make this video seem like I want to talk about individual recklessness, or to try to frame this as people are stupid and self-destructive. And that framing will be a lie. So let me tell you about what the actual data says about accessing healthcare in America. As of 2024, over 25 million Americans have no health insurance. Another 40 million are underinsured, which means they have coverage that won't actually cover what they need without catastrophic out-of-pocket costs. The average psychiatric appointment wait for someone trying to get help with anxiety, depression, and other types of mental health conditions that often drive substance use in the first place is 25 days in urban areas and can be up to 6 weeks in more rural areas. Testosterone replacement therapy, which is a legitimate FDA-approved treatment for men with documented low testosterone, is routinely denied by insurance or requires months of documentation and multiple field lab values before coverage kicks in. A simple vial of compounded tirzepatide costs $150 a month. A month of FDA-approved Zepbound, same drug, same molecule, costs $1,060 without insurance. So people are not self-medicating because they want to bypass the system. Most of them are self-medicating because the system has made it clear it doesn't have time for them. Now, this is not an excuse. This is a cause. So we cannot talk about the DIY drug crisis without sitting inside that truth for a moment. And I'll tell you something else that's not new. Before the FDA existed, before any of these regulations we now take for granted, America had a thriving tradition of self-medication. It was called the patient medication era, and it ran from the 1850s to about 1906. If you walked into any pharmacy in 1890, you could buy Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, which was marketed for teething babies, but it contained morphine. You could buy cocaine toothache drops, which were marketed for dental pain, and they're exactly what that sounds like. You could also buy Bayer Heroin, and yes, that's the same Bayer Pharmaceuticals that makes aspirin today. And it was marketed as a non-addictive substitute for morphine, and all of these were available over the counter. These products were advertised in newspapers, sold in general stores, and endorsed by celebrities. And the marketing language was remarkably familiar. Natural remedies, self-empowerment, looks maxing, oral farming, the freedom to manage your own health. And what created this culture in the first place was a healthcare system that was inaccessible for most people and a distrust for medical authority, which we're seeing so much of that nowadays, and an industry that was happy to profit from all of these things. And that really never went away. And so we're in the second part of the patient medicine era, and the internet is our traveling salesman. So people like Tiger Woods, and there's so many people like him, have access to literally anything. The best pain medication specialists, the best rehab facilities, every resource that the healthcare system can offer. And yet, they still end up with drug cocktails in their systems and have no idea where they are when they get stopped by the cops. Because what unlimited access actually gives you is the ability to keep finding doctors who would say yes, the ability to avoid any no, and the ability to fire anyone who tries to slow you down. And those are the guardrails that didn't just bend for Tiger, they were removed entirely. The peptide user in their bathroom has no guardrails because they can't afford them or can't access them or have been failed by these guardrails before. Look, I'm not here to tell you that every peptide is dangerous or that compounded semaglutide is inherently evil, or that people should just comply with the healthcare system that has repeatedly failed them. As a nurse and as somebody who lives in this nuance, what I'm saying is this. The conversation we keep having, the one that blames individuals for bad health decisions, is missing the structure underneath those decisions. And until we fix that structure, we will keep producing generations of people who feel their only option is to become their own physician. And so if you learned something today, subscribe, because on this channel we go deep and there's a lot more where this came from. I'll see you in the next one, and stay healthy.